You hear a lot of information about pegged versus unpegged worm weights. Today you will get to see side-by-side comparisons underwater. You can then choose what is best for you in your situation. For this test, I used 1/4 ounce tungsten worm weights on 2 different baits, a standard finesse worm and then a craw. One has little resistance in the water, the other has a lot. I also tested these 4 different ways, and the last one is really interesting because it often goes against what we have been told. A lot of this footage is in slow motion so you can really see the detail of the retrieve. First, let's jump to a double pop or hopping retrieve. Here's the worm. Pegged is on the left side of your screen and unpegged is on the right. As you would expect with a worm with little resistance, when it's pegged, it moves quickly and with sharp changes of direction. Unpegged, there's a little slower fall after the weight hits the bottom. But if you want your weight unpegged, you still have to be careful of this. Depending on the knot that you use, sometimes the weight can get stuck on the knot and stop it from sliding like we think it should be doing. To fix this, you can either cut that tag end shorter or even embed the eye of the hook deeper into the plastic. Also, different knots finish with the tag end either up or down, so experiment and see what works best for you. Now, here is the double pop with the plastic craw, which has way more resistance in the water. As we can see, there is a noticeable change in how the lure acts. If you want a sharper, more intense change of direction, the pegged works. If you like the lure to finish with the slower glide, go unpegged. And if you look carefully, you can see on the unpegged lure how it kicks to the side when the weight hits the bottom and stops pulling it. And in my opinion, a change of direction like that is always a good thing. But the key takeaway is lures with more resistance or appendages that slow them down will act very differently than something like, of course, the straight-tailed worm. Now, let's check out the fall in 2 different stages. First, when it just enters the water, here's the worm. As we would expect, they look very similar between the pegged and unpegged. That slender body falls quickly. And here's the craw as it just enters the water. You can clearly notice that the pegged craw falls quicker than the unpegged version. Those appendages resisting the water make a difference as soon as it starts to fall. Now let's look at the bottom part of the initial drop, right when it is ready to hit the bottom of the lake bed. First, the worm. Just like with the double pop retrieve, the unpegged worm kicks to the side when the weight hits bottom. While the majority of the fall, there isn't a lot of difference between the two, the actual contact with the lake bed is where we see what one does over the other. Is one better? Well, that's up to you to decide. Now here's the craw on the bottom part of the initial drop. With this lure, there's a huge difference in what happens. The unpegged craw floats down much slower when that weight hits. But take note that once the weight does hit the bottom, the pulsing action of the appendages stops. The lure just floats down. Good, bad, indifferent? Let the bass tell you which they respond to on any given day, but you can see here there is a definite difference. Now the last test I did, a pegged versus unpegged worm weight coming over a branch. The general thought is that if we don't peg the weight in this situation, the lure will get hung on the branch and not follow the weight over. Well, let's start with the worm. As you can see, there is practically zero difference in how the worm acts and what really happens when it comes up and over this branch. I did this again and again and again and could never get the worm to get stuck like we often hear about. Does it happen? I would sure imagine so at times, but I couldn't make it happen here. Now for the craw. As you can see, with the appendages creating more resistance, the weight and lure separate much more than they did with the worm. And finally, one time after many, many tests, I was able to witness the lure get stuck on a branch, but the vast majority of the time, it followed the weight over and acted like we hoped it would. And hey, if you'd like to watch a video about what bass did right here after a cold front, I captured them on underwater footage of where they went, Go ahead and check this video out right here, and make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.